Macbeth, a play written in the Jacobean era in 1603 by a renowned playwright at the time, William Shakespeare, and King James VI of Scotland was the King of England. This play was one of Shakespeare's greatest tragedies. Time to show off the characters of the play. To begin with, Macbeth, a brave and courageous soldier in King Duncan's army, but gets tempted into murder by Lady Macbeth and commits further atrocities like killing his best friend Banquo and his rival Macduff's wife and children. And now for the next character, King Duncan, a mild-mannered man, very kind and quite generous towards his kingdom, but eventually gets murdered in cold blood by Macbeth in the middle of the night. And now time for the most interesting character on the list so far, Lady Macbeth, a cunning and manipulative woman who managed to make her own husband kill their king in cold blood. She wants to become more masculine, as we hear throughout the play. She also commits suicide later on. The reason for Lady Macbeth committing suicide was the sudden guilt of her killing King Duncan and her wanting to wash the guilt out of her hands. Now time for the foil character for Macbeth, Macduff, a man who is very loyal to his country and to his family, especially. Macduff decides to side with Malcolm in taking down Macbeth. Malcolm and Donalbain are King Duncan's two sons that would have been heir to the throne if they hadn't fled in fear. Macduff ends up chopping off Macbeth's head in their final battle at the end of the play. Now that you know the main characters, we can begin to tell you the start of the story. At the beginning, King Duncan and his troops go into battle against the traitorous Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth kills him, and then the captain and King Duncan speak incredibly highly of him. Macbeth and Banquo are riding back on their horses on the way back to their camp, and then when along the way, they meet a group of witches, who are old women who tell them prophecies, such as the fact that Macbeth will become the new Thane of Cawdor when he gets back, and will also become the king at some point, which we later find out to be true. They also say to Banquo that he is lesser than Macbeth, but also greater. Now that we know this, we can now head into the next part of the story. Macbeth and Banquo arrive back at their camp for a group of men on steeds to show up with a box. This box came from King Duncan himself. It holds the gold chain that awards you the rank of Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth is now the new Thane of Cawdor. Banquo says if this supernatural soliciting could not be good, this probably means that it's not very good for them. But Macbeth doesn't question it, and accepts his new title and wears it proudly. The next major plot point is when Macbeth and Lady Macbeth invite Duncan, his two sons Malcolm and Donalbain, his foil character Macduff, and his best friend Banquo over for a feast in celebration. As in the dead of night, Lady Macbeth drugs the guards outside of King Duncan's room, and Macbeth goes in and stabs him to gain the title of king. Now that King Duncan is dead, they take the bloody daggers and wipe the blood on the hands and faces of the guards to make it look like they did it. The next morning comes and no one has suspected a thing, but Macduff asks for where the king is. Macbeth says he'll go wake him, but do the others want to come with him? They chose to. They go to King Duncan's room, open the door. Macduff goes in and realizes that King Duncan's dead body, littered with golden blood, is there dead in his bed, forever asleep. No one suspects it was Macbeth, though. The only person who suspected it was Macbeth was Banquo. Everyone there at the time decides to blame it on the guards outside King Duncan's doorway, because of the blood and the daggers making it look very obvious that they had done it, even though it was actually Macbeth. You might be wondering how Macbeth gets crowned king if he's just a regular soldier. This is because King Duncan's two heirs, Malcolm and Donalbain, flee the country because they are in fear that someone is trying to kill them as well as King Duncan. Which I'm pretty sure most people would be if your father had just died. Macbeth then becomes the new king, and a lot of people think of him as just simply innocent, just a little lamb, as if he's never done anything wrong. Well, boy, they would be mistaken when they find out what he's going to do next. Macbeth's foil character, Macduff, doesn't show up to Macbeth's coronation, but instead goes back to his wife and children in their castle. This is a direct showing of opposition, but Macduff doesn't like Macbeth and doesn't want him to be king. Many characters subtly cast suspicion on Macbeth of committing the murder, but none of them wholeheartedly think it was him. After King Duncan's death, Ross and the old man say that a lot of strange things have begun to happen around the world. For example, animals have started eating each other, strange weather patterns have started to occur, and this is all when Macbeth came to the throne. Could this be a sign of what's to come? When Macbeth is alone, he uses soliloquy and says to himself that it's funny that the only person he fears in Scotland at the moment is his best friend Banquo, for he's the only one who seems to wholeheartedly think it was Macbeth who committed the murder. To cast suspicion off of Macbeth, Macbeth sends out a group of assassins to kill Banquo and his son Fleance. Fleance manages to survive and escapes, whereas Banquo dies. Then later in that same act, Macbeth sees the ghost of Banquo and jumps out of his seat. Lady Macbeth calms him and says to the court that there's no need to worry and that she can sort her husband fine. This is the sign of Macbeth's beginning insanity. After this whole escapade with Macbeth seeing Banquo's ghost, he decides to make the conscious decision to go and see the witches again, see if they can give him any more answers, and for them to tell him the truth. At the start of Act 4, Macbeth goes to go see the witches whilst they're dancing around a strange pot adding ingredients. Macbeth asks them if he has anything to fear. They say he does not. He can only be killed by a man that is not born of a woman, and that he will only die when Birnam Wood approaches Dunsinane. Lennox then enters the scene and tells Macbeth that Macduff has fled to England and left his wife and kids alone in their castle. Macbeth sees this as a perfect opportunity to kill Macduff's wife and kids. He sends out an assassin and he goes and kills both of them in cold blood. Ross seems to be urging Macduff and Malcolm to come back to Scotland and help take down Macbeth, as he is a tyrant and is killing people. The saying goes that one murder leads to more, and this seems to be true in this case. By the time the assassins have killed Macduff's wife and children, Macbeth has gone fully insane. Malcolm and Macduff in England are discussing how Macbeth is the worst possible king for Scotland and how he is a tyrant. They then gather an army of about 10,000 or so soldiers and begin to start heading towards Scotland. At the beginning of Act 5, a doctor, an attendant, and Lady Macbeth are currently discussing why Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking. Lady Macbeth is asleep sleepwalking, saying how she needs to wash the blood off of her hands and the guilt she got from killing King Duncan. The doctor and the attendant discuss this. Macbeth hears of Malcolm and Macduff's army approaching him in Dunsinane. He fears not, though, because he says that no man born of a woman can kill him, not realising that Macduff is a Caesarean birth, means that he was not born of a woman. As the battle begins, Macbeth is slashing away at people as they're slashing away at him, saying that no one can kill him. But then Macduff enters. Macbeth and Macduff duel. Macduff chops off Macbeth's head and carries it proudly to where Malcolm is crowned as king. The tyrant Macbeth has been slain. Thank you for watching this video. If you did enjoy, please remember to like and subscribe to me on YouTube. This was quite an interesting video to make. I've never made anything like this before, and remember, this was all for homework, not from my own accord. Thank you for watching.